Hi, and welcome to the Spark the Hearts podcast. My name is Lizzie, and I'm an intuitive energy channel and a Reiki practitioner. This podcast is a safe space where we talk about spirituality, energetics, cycles, rebirth, and so much more. So while I'm in your field of awareness today, I hope you tune into the frequency of this episode with an open heart and a new sense of curiosity. As a reminder, you're a sovereign being, so take what resonates and leave what doesn't. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to this week's episode. I hope that you've been having a good couple of weeks in between from the last one. And if you're binge listening to my podcast, welcome. I'm so honored to have you here, and I'm just so grateful and thankful. If you're on a platform that allows you to leave a comment to let me know how you guys are doing today, please, I invite you to do so. I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from, what's going on in your part of the world, and how life be lifing for you. Now, I wanted to make this podcast episode about what are cycles, and I started to really I had recorded this episode 2 to 3 times already. And even today, as I'm going to sit down and edit it, I realize you guys are here to hear me explain my perspective on things and also get real about stuff. And I felt like I was just giving you guys the textbook definition of what a cycle is, what it can feel like and look like. And, I call in support from archangels to give these examples. But I realize now I also have to talk about my experiences. And I had this pull and tug about how raw do I want to get with my experiences and how much I want to share, because for me, cycles have not been an easy thing. They really haven't. And they hit very different levels in my life, depending on if it was a cycle that is ancestral, if it is a cycle within my immediate family, if it is a cycle that I'm having internally with myself or a romantic partner, or friendships, or whether it's career. Cycles expand within us and outside of us, and it's not just one thing. It can be so many. So I feel like I'm going to start off this podcast episode just being honest. I'm out here in my backyard. I'm about to edit this podcast, and I thought, you know what? I've had this feeling of this episode needs more. It is my sazon, my flavor, my personal experience with it, because I shit you not, it has not been easy. Even sitting here and being in my backyard, and you guys can obviously hear this noises, so I do apologize, but I felt like I just wanted to show the messy side of it as well, because it's not always perfect. You're not going to get everything in one try. You're not always going to figure out everything immediately. And I feel like I got to bring that honesty, that rawness, that authenticity to this podcast, because at the end of the day, this was not easy for me. And I only share this so that you don't feel like, oh my God, it's so easy for everybody to figure out this awareness, so easy to figure out the spirituality aspect of stuff, so easy to set boundaries. It was not easy for me. It took either being physically in pain, emotionally in pain, mentally stressed out or burnout to get me to be the person I am today. Me 3 years ago, me 5 years ago, me 10 years ago, 20 years ago is not the same person. I honestly was debating how much do I want to share with my listeners, because I don't know how else to be of service if I'm not honest with you guys. And so for me, I just wanted to share a few of my personal experiences with cycles. They have never been freaking easy. They got easier with time, but some of the hardest cycles I had to undergo were themes that were with my family, ancestral. And I feel like it's nice to call out these frequencies and this energy. And I feel like lately this year has been really calling me to just speak up and talk about family dynamics that aren't the easiest, because I don't come from a perfect family. I don't think anybody really does, even though we might, have some good things, but nobody's really perfect. And I mean, my ancestral background is very diverse, is what I'm starting to learn this year through just DNA itself. But at the same time, it's like I didn't really understand how different my family was until I started interacting with other families. And what I mean by that is specifically when I got with my husband, who was then my boyfriend, I really started to realize parts in my family that weren't quote unquote normal. I come from a family that didn't really express the word I love you. Though I am a very affectionate person to my husband, my friends, and now I'm learning to expand that out with my family, my immediate family. I didn't grow up in a household where we hugged. I didn't grow up in a household where we said I loved you or expressed our feelings. It was more of, the typical, we make fun of each other to show affection. If one of us is really hurting, then we can show a little bit of vulnerability. But I was raised in a household where it was seen as a weakness to have so much feeling, where we didn't really talk about the problems. We put them under the rug and we hid them, even though we were all not okay inside. And it gets really hard to talk about this stuff because it's not easy. And I'm actively working on healing this aspect by expressing my emotions and speaking with the truth that comes from the heart, and setting boundaries in the ways that I need to protect myself. And when I say protect myself, it's not overexerting myself like I used to do, because a part of that cycle ancestrally is, and I don't know if you guys have this too, but my family's background is Mexican, so it's very much about family, showing up, doing things, but it wasn't always in service of oneself. It's always like, you got to show up. Like, I'm your mom, I got to do everything for my mom. You got to show up for the family, you got to make sure. Like, I would see my mom have these cycles with her mom, even though her mom was not the best mom. And to be fair, she wasn't the best grandma. And so, as you guys can kind of get a vibe for on my previous podcast episode, and I'm calling this out because it's not to talk smack on my family, but it's also to show how family dynamics, when unhealthy and they are allowed to continue on, can really affect people in more ways than one. For me personally, is seeing my mom as a young kid, making sure that she sends money to Mexico because her mom needs it for whatever thing, making sure that the family is okay, but her mom never provided emotional support, never made her feel, in a sense, loved or supported, but she still had that sense of obligation and duty for the family that was very much there. So if you have that type of dynamic in your background, pay attention to your parents and see how it plays out, and see how maybe that was, in a sense, imprinted onto you, because I know it was to me. For the longest time, I would do things out of the sense of obligation for my mother. And it is until I started to kind of really back up and stop trying to be someone who was just doing things, because in a sense you can be showing up and providing monetarily and being of support because you think, oh, okay, I gotta be there because my mom didn't have that with her mom. But in reality, you also have to see the other side of it. Was I being provided with the same type of energy? Because at one point I could see my mom, she loves me, she cares for me, but there are things within our relationship that wasn't the best. And this goes hand in hand with cycles, because I started to see that there was the same cycle of me providing to someone who wasn't providing for me. And that's that if you want to call it the mother wound. And I felt unsupported in the ways that I needed for me. Yet I always showed up and I said, I need to stop this, because even though she is my mother and I love her dearly, I can't continue the same cycle she allowed to continue in her life, whether she was conscious of it or not. I am. So that's one uncomfortable cycle that I'm currently working on myself with the support of my therapist, and speaking up, saying what I can and can't do, and not providing in the same ways, especially when I do not feel supported in the same manner. And why I bring this up is because I know everybody is healing at different aspects, but I truly feel like if you're listening to this podcast and you are attuned to my frequency and my voice, there's something on this episode that is meant to hit your awareness. So that's like one family dynamic cycle that's there that I can easily call out now. And it took me 30 something years to be fully aware of it, because my consciousness needed to grow. My experiences outside of my family needed to show me things. And cycles are immensely multidimensional, super intricate, and magical at the same time, because there are cycles that are playing out within your being to build that confidence, to build that awareness, to build that choice point within yourself. And I love my mentor Amy, because she taught me about choice points when I was having one-on-ones with her, and I will forever be grateful. So if you are tuning in, Amy, at any point, I just want to say shout out, girl. Thank you. I appreciate you giving me that understanding, because we all have choice points within ourselves, whether we allow something to continue or not. And I feel like at that point of me understanding that I was overextending and giving more than what I was receiving, there was an imbalance. And in order to create that balance within myself, I needed to really look at the situation and see it. And at first it started with me not being able to provide in the same way, me not feeling like I was being provided for. But then when I had the moment to integrate and really look at things and see further out, I could see this pattern has been something that's been going on generations. My mother did it to her mother. My grandmother did the same to her mother. And who knows for how long it's been going on, or the sense of not being enough but still showing up out of obligation and duty. So if this is you, know you're not alone. Now that's an ancestral cycle that I've been working on. And another one that I would say is personal would be one with my cycle of food, my health. That is a totally different one that has spiraled out and expand out in so many different ways. I could say honestly, as a child, I grew up in a home where food was not monitored. So it wasn't like I was super overweight, but like I can indulge in snacks. I could really honestly say that back then we would not drink water. It would be like juices, milk, sodas, Capri Suns. Like I was not hydrating. It wasn't the same way as it is now, where everybody's like, you need to hydrate, make sure you drink your water. Not everybody was carrying around their water bottles to stay hydrated. I remember being at the park and freaking having Capri Suns. Like that was the thing. If you were running around and sweating, if we were outside playing, I'd come into the house and there'd be like a soda and I'd be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna drink this. It's gonna cool me down and whatever. But it's not like there was somebody around who was really teaching nutrition to me in that sense. So you can only imagine like the things, not only on, how would I say this? I'm trying to describe something that I see in my mind, but I'm having a hard time to connect with my words. But you could see the patterns that have been playing out within my family about nutrition, because my mom had always struggled with her weight. And I remember she would buy all this stuff in the house, but there was no sense of control as far as like how much we were eating. Yeah, she'd be like, you can only have one of these, but she's a single mom. She wouldn't be home. She couldn't really monitor us. So we'd get home from school and we'd literally indulge. We didn't always have the best habits of like how to cook things. Like I would be cooking and I'd be using heck of oil to make pancakes, or I would be doing things because that's how I grew up and that's what tasted good to me. And so as I started to get older, and especially when I moved out of the house, I started to see that my cooking style changed. I didn't really have milk in the house or my apartment then. I wasn't cooking with a bunch of oil. I was still like salting my food like crazy. But then at one point I started to realize I didn't like the way my body was looking. And so I decided, and I had a choice, that in order for me to feel better, I needed to actively do something. So at that point, I decided I'm going to go ahead and run around the apartment complex and lose some weight. And so I did that. And then I started to realize, okay, aside from losing weight and, doing the exercises, like what kind of foods can I integrate? And that's when it really started to switch up. And I noticed through my relationship with my then boyfriend, now husband, he kind of would make a comment of, why do you throw salt on your food before you taste it? And I was just like, what? He goes, I noticed that you do this thing where you make dinner and you taste it while you're cooking, but then when you sit down at the table, you throw salt. And I was just like, oh, it's just habit. And he was like, okay. But I remember being a kid and my mom would like take us out to go get tacos. And it would be a thing to just like open up the salt packet, put the salt on top of the tacos and like the lemon and just eat it like super salty because that's what I enjoyed. But I didn't realize that this is a habit I picked up because of family dynamics, like these things, these patterns, and my mom would eat in a certain way and I picked up on that habit too. And so I was just like, oh, I didn't notice. And then he would just kind of just made a comment, but he brought awareness to my action. I thought, this is interesting. And so then, he also noticed because he grew up in a completely different household than mine. And he was just like, you use a lot of oil in your food. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. He goes, you could still do this. So he taught me new ways of cooking. And I thought it was really interesting because nobody ever took the time to say something like that to me. Not saying that it came from a place of like, oh, you need to stop that, but more of like just curiosity. And he had me reflect. And I thought, I really appreciate that because I didn't know any other way. Like, I grew up doing that. Nobody ever said that it was wrong. Nobody ever really questioned it. And it's not like I went over to my friends' houses and cooked over there. We'd hang out, talk and stuff, but nobody was around to see the way that I would cook until I got with my husband, then boyfriend. So I found it really fascinating that he would just say a few things. Then my relationship started to switch up with the way I would cook. And that would also kind of trickle out into my family dynamics. And here's how. So I was on a cycle of breaking old habits of how I would eat, right? I wouldn't incorporate the same stuff because now I had this new sense of awareness, like, okay, you don't need that much oil to make this food. You don't need to salt in your food. And maybe you need to be aware of what you're inputting into your body because some of the ingredients in these things, like red dyes, when I found that out, I was like, oh my God, no, I don't want to eat anything with red dye in it. And there was this whole thing, and it's found in a lot of things. You'd be surprised. And like being aware of like how much sugar in this and stuff. And then I started to really get into this health kick, and I said, okay, I'm not going to do this. So when it came time to like go visit my mom and have some food or something, I'd be like, hey, can you like not put so much oil in it or this? And then she kind of got offended. Not kind of, she did. Because I remember she'd be like, what do you mean? I go, well, I don't really eat like that. Can you watch? And she just took it as like, what is going on with you? I didn't mean it in a way of being disrespectful, but I can see now it's like telling somebody, hey, can you not make it like that even though you made it your whole life this way? And so that turned into me realizing, oh, I'm really shaking up patterns that have been within my family for a really long time. And just because I'm ready to break off those cycles of unconscious eating or unconscious cooking and being more intentional and conscious with what I'm making to put it into my body doesn't mean everybody outside me was. And that, in a sense, caused friction. And even to this day, it's something that still comes up because at this point now, I'm a vegetarian, so I don't eat meat. There's been times where like during the holidays, my mom will make tamales. And it's like you think she'd kind of understand by now that I don't eat meat, but I'm cool with cheeses and I'm cool with this. And even like the making of the pozole, I would ask, like, can we not put, can you make like some with just the bone broth and all this? And it's like she looks at me like I'm crazy sometimes, which is funny to me now while I'm talking about this, but it kind of hurts, Not kind of, it does, because it's somebody who's showing me that they're not willing to change or budge for me. And for the longest time, I would just be like, oh, it's okay. But then I had to also learn, no, I need to be firm in my decisions. And also then if you're not going to budge in the way that you make food, then I don't have to partake in the consuming the food that isn't for me. And whether or not emotions get hurt, and that's another thing, and just being able to talk it out. And then also understanding that even if I try to explain, if the person is not receptive on the other end of what I am doing, it is not my job to always make them understand. It's just by basically stating this, and sometimes that creates uncomfortableness. So this is why I say cycles haven't been easy for me, because I've had to do them with really close people in my life and intimate family relationships, friendships, as well as romantic. And it's taking me a sense of awareness and willingness to get vulnerable and willingness to build boundaries in ways that I was never taught to do before. And it goes against everything that I grew up with and shedding what isn't mine so that I could have those conversations, so that I could stand on my own. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable. So I wanted to put this piece in here because, again, you guys could easily Google what a cycle is. But if I don't share what it's felt like for me and how it can unfold in real life, it could take years to go through cycles. It's not something where, oh, it's just a cycle, it's a season. No. It took me being 20 something to start to really give me awareness of what was the food I was putting in my mouth. And then another 10 years to really switch it out to, okay, now I want to be a vegetarian. And my reasoning was it was getting too hard to chew on meat. It was getting too hard to chew on certain foods, and it wasn't tasting the same in my mouth. And that's my personal thing. I wanted to do it for me. It was not making my body feel like this. I still have chicken broth. I still have beef broth. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't eat the meat. And so everybody has their own personal reasons for doing things. These are mine. But I realize, and I really want to put an emphasis on that, though we want to push through things fast, though we want to have results instantly, it takes time for certain things and lessons to unfold. Because I had that uncomfortableness with my family and realizing oh, we don't hug. Now I can hug my siblings and express that I love them and that I care for them and say sorry and be more vulnerable, because I understand now that there wasn't that level of emotional intelligence in my household to be able to express emotions, because that was not taught either. And me choosing to be vulnerable, to be expressive, to do the hard thing that was against my programming, and throughout the cycles of having uncomfortableness come up, then I realized, okay, this is what cycles look like, and this is what healing looks like. And so I'm saying all this so that you can understand that it could take years to really go through something and have that level of awareness within yourself. And I really wanted to do you guys the justice of sharing something about me so that you can reflect about your life. What are some cycles that you can really go back to, whether it's the same thing for you? Is it food? How was your relationship with food in your household? Was it strict? Was it pretty lax? Like me personally, when my mom would go on a diet, the whole house would have to go on a diet. And I freaking hate diets to this day because of that. Because it took away my freedom of choice of what I wanted to put into my body as a kid. And so I don't have that same outlook on diets. I don't like the word diet. I prefer a lifestyle choice. But that is up to you. And then another question is, what are some patterns that you see playing out with your parents that you realize there's an imbalance there? I feel like maybe you have that same theme of obligation to your family, but you don't feel that support being sent back to you. And can you see that same theme between whether it's your father or your mother? Was that same theme unfolding with their parents? And is it running through you too? Because there are cycles that were unfolding before you even were thought of or birthed onto this planet. And those cycles can sometimes come to your awareness because it's your turn to break them. because last generation felt that there was something there, but didn't feel uncomfortable enough to do something different. Your generation is here to feel that uncomfortableness in your body, in your soul, in your mind, in your emotions, and really change it up. So how has that impacted you? I wanted to do the justice of speaking about cycles in a way that is true to me, that has been felt, but I wanted to at least get you guys to really think and reflect. What are cycles that are still running in my life? And then you also want to think about, what are the cycles I have broken, There's a sense of balance that's needed here, because you could look at all the things you haven't done, but I don't want you to get stuck in the what I haven't done. I also want you to reflect and honor yourself in a way where, what are the things that you stopped? Whether it be a cycle of addiction, whether it be a cycle of self-worth. Did you notice that there was like a low self-esteem in your family, and did you switch that up by being more of yourself, by being loud, by being present, and not shutting yourself off to your emotions? Was there a cycle of no emotional intelligence? Did you go against the grain in your family? Did you go against the grain with your friendships? Are you pulling apart from old patterns? Sometimes you can outgrow cycles because you realize you had those choice points to not continue it on. And through the process of time, you learn so much. And even if you don't get it right the first time, it's okay. The cycles repeat so that you gain a different level of awareness. And maybe through that process of awareness, and as the cycles are unfolding, you're being gifted with the courage to speak up. Maybe you didn't have the words or the emotions cleared up enough to speak up and know who you are. Or maybe you didn't have the mental awareness to be able to decide for yourself that this is something I do want to continue or not. Maybe you just didn't have the support outside of you or within yourself, whatever it may be. But the cycles that kept repeating kept showing you something, and allowed you to grow and strengthen in those areas that you needed to be able to go forward in the manner that you needed to. Don't discredit your struggle. Sometimes through struggle, we learn the hardest lessons, but we gain the most freedom within ourselves, whether that be an emotional, mental, physical, or spiritual aspect. You gain this freedom that you can't buy, and that nobody can teach, because you had to experience it in the manner that you needed to in order to be yourself. So at the same time, I want you to give yourself a round of applause. And if you're not going to do it, I'm doing it for you. Give me a second. You did the damn thing, and keep going forward. It's not easy, but it's worth it. It's worth it because then you set yourself free from the past in a way that builds your future in your present day as well, to be something that sits in the heart in a way that's freedom. It feels refreshing, feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like a weight's lifted off of your shoulders, off of your chest, off of your back, off of your legs, off your hips. You feel lighter in the sense that you're more of you, and you've been carrying this stuff that isn't you for such a long time, that you've built yourself the strength enough to get that weight off of you that had pulled you down for so long, that no longer needs to sit on you. You built that awareness, you built that emotional intelligence, you built that physical strength and verbal strength to speak, be, and embody your truth. And that speaks immensely of who you are. So trust when things come up, they're for you and not against you. And I'm getting a little teary-eyed because right now I'm in this transition in different ways where I'm starting to realize, like, don't be afraid of what's unknown. Instead, connect with what is known and amplify it in a way that supports you. And when I say you, I also include myself, because I can get lost in the sauce, as my husband says. But it's really when you take the moment to be present and know that I've done this shit before, I can fucking do it again. So let's go. Let's fucking do this thing. We're going to make something magical happen. Well, that's it for this week's podcast episode. Please let me know what thoughts came through your mind or what experiences that you've had in your life. If you're, again, on a platform that you could share this information, I also share snippets of this podcast episode as reels on Instagram and YouTube. So if you're on those platforms and you haven't already followed me, write me there. I'd love to hear what's going on with you guys, how this episode hit your field of awareness, and what are some cycles you're currently going on. And if there's anything that you'd want me to talk about or share, by all means, I'd love to hear back from you. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in today. To stay up to date on all my happenings and offerings, I invite you to follow me on my YouTube channel and Instagram, which is at Spark the Hearts with the Z at the end. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, please see the links to my booking page and website on the show notes of this episode. Thank you again for tuning in, and I look forward to our next gathering. Bye for now.